All right, welcome in everyone. We're diving deep today, really deep, and this one is for you, specifically you. If you're ready to ditch the need for constant outside approval and build that rock-solid self-esteem from the inside out, like how do we move from needing everyone's thumbs up to feeling good about ourselves no matter what?
Totally. And we've got some seriously fascinating perspectives to help us unpack this. Like, why do we crave validation from others in the first place? And more importantly, what are the steps we can take to start cultivating that inner strength, that real self-worth that doesn't crumble when someone disagrees with us or that post doesn't get enough likes?
So our mission today is simple. We're extracting the golden nuggets, the actionable strategies that'll help you build that unshakable self-esteem. No fluff, just real practical tools you can start using right away. And we're going to cover it all. Recognizing those patterns that keep us stuck, learning to treat ourselves with genuine compassion, bringing mindfulness into the picture, even mapping out a 90-day plan with concrete steps. This is about moving from, I know I should work on my self-esteem, to actually making it happen.
And that's crucial. It's like the first step is always shining a light on where you are right now, understanding that starting point, self-awareness.
Right. It's like trying to navigate a new city without a map. You might have a vague idea of where you want to go, but if you don't know where you are, it's pretty tough to get there. So on this journey, the "you are here" is often this tendency we have to seek validation from others.
Yes, exactly. And I think what's interesting here is how fragile that foundation can be. When your sense of worth comes from things like the number of likes on a post, a passing compliment, or someone else saying, good job, that's shaky ground, like building a house on sand, right? It's constantly vulnerable to these external forces you can't really control. Up when you get praise, down when there's silence or criticism. It's exhausting.
It really is like this emotional roller coaster you're constantly on. And it makes you think, how much is this need for outside approval actually holding us back from being truly authentic? Maybe we're editing ourselves, carefully curating what we say or do, almost performing for an audience just to get that nod of acceptance. That has to be draining.
It's a huge drain. It prevents you from being fully yourself, from expressing your true thoughts and feelings and needs. And ultimately, it's unsustainable. That little boost you get from validation, it fades quickly. So you're constantly chasing it, creating this never-ending cycle. It's almost like borrowing worth, right? And it can be called back at any moment.
So for you, the listener, where do you notice this in your own life? Like, what are some everyday situations where that urge for validation pops up?
I think a lot of us feel it online. That nervous feeling before you hit post and then constantly checking for likes and comments, or even in how we make decisions. Do you find yourself needing to consult everyone else, even for small things, or worrying what others will think before you feel good about your choice?
Oh, that social media one, for sure. It's so easy to get sucked in. And the decision-making thing, that fear of getting it wrong in someone else's eyes, it can be paralyzing.
Absolutely. And think about how you respond to feedback, especially criticism. Does it feel like a personal attack, like a judgment on your entire being? Or, on the flip side, do you need constant praise just to feel okay about yourself? Then there's social situations. Do you try to blend in, change your opinions or behavior just to be liked? Or maybe saying yes to things you'd rather not do just to avoid disappointing someone? Prioritizing their comfort over your own inner peace.
Ooh, that yes trap. I think we've all fallen into that one a few or many times. And what about at work? Or even how we feel about how we look?
Definitely. Our careers can become so entangled with our self-worth. Our job performance, promotions, achievements. If those become the measure of our value as a person, a setback can feel devastating. And with appearance, constantly seeking compliments on how you look, worrying if those compliments don't come. It all points back to that external validation. And it can show up in relationships too, right? Like needing a partner to feel complete or changing parts of yourself to keep them happy. Even when you're feeling down or uncertain, do you find yourself reaching for external reassurance to feel better?
It's amazing how many areas of life this touches in it.
Yeah.
But what's going on beneath the surface? If we start to recognize these patterns, what are those deeper needs that are actually driving this urge for validation from others?
That's the key question, right? And I think often at the heart of it is a feeling of insecurity or maybe low self-worth, that belief that you're not enough on your own. So validation becomes this quick fix, this temporary Band-Aid that tries to cover up that feeling.
I get that. It's like we're looking for someone else to give us permission to feel okay about ourselves.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's tied to a fear of rejection, of being abandoned. So we're constantly worried about being judged, making mistakes, not meeting expectations. It can also be about loneliness. Maybe we're mistaking external attention for real connection. or even shame, that painful feeling of being flawed or unworthy. We're trying to cover it up with praise from others.
So it's almost like we're trying to fill this internal void with external approval, with applause, with likes.
Precisely. And sometimes perfectionism plays a role too, right? That feeling that you have to be flawless to be worthy of love and acceptance. So you're constantly looking for external confirmation that you're meeting these impossibly high standards.
It's exhausting. So where does this all start? Are there common roots to this validation-seeking behavior?
Often, yes. And understanding those roots, it can really help build self-compassion. Think about childhood experiences. For instance, growing up in an environment where love felt conditional, tied to achievements rather than just being you, that teaches you, on a deep level, that your worth depends on external factors. It's like learning this rule book for love that has all these requirements.
Right, that conditional love. Like you have to do something to be worthy of affection and acceptance.
Exactly. Or having critical, judgmental caregivers, or even experiencing neglect. If your emotional needs weren't consistently met, you might learn to seek attention in any form, equating external reactions with feeling seen and valued. Then there's things like bullying or social exclusion, which can leave these deep wounds about belonging, and then later in life, it fuels that need for social validation.
And we can't forget about all the societal messages we're bombarded with constantly. Like those messages that tell us our worth is tied to wealth, status, or appearance. It's like everywhere we look, there's a billboard defining our value based on external stuff.
It's everywhere, even how we receive praise. If it's always focused on external things instead of, effort, character, or inner qualities, it can teach us that those external things are what truly matters.
It is a lot to unpack. So if we are starting to see these patterns and we're getting a handle on the drivers and the roots, what can we actually do to start shifting away from this need for external validation? What are some concrete first steps?
Well, the sources emphasize cultivating two things: self-observation and emotional journaling. Those are really the foundation here.
Okay, let's break those down. First, self-observation. What does that actually look like in practice?
Basically, it's about becoming a curious observer of your own inner world. Your thoughts, your feelings, even your physical sensations. But the key is you're observing without judgment. Like you're taking a step back and watching yourself with this kind, curious attitude, almost as if you were a separate person.
So noticing what's going on inside us without getting caught up in it, without immediately reacting.
Yes. Because when we're seeking external validation, it's often automatic, right? It's reactive.
Yeah.
And self-observation helps you interrupt that cycle, by noticing that thought, oh, I need to check my phone to see if they responded. Or that anxiety before you share your opinion, you create a little space. And in that space, you can choose a different response. And mindfulness practices, they can really help with this.
Yeah, like just taking a few mindful breaths or paying attention to how your body feels.
Exactly. Even 30 seconds to focus on your breath or checking in with your body. Like, are your shoulders tense? Is your stomach tight? It can really ground you in the present moment. It helps you become more aware of those internal cues that often signal the urge to seek validation. The key, again, is non-judgment. You're not criticizing yourself for wanting approval. You're just noticing that it's there. And that awareness, it opens the door to understanding and change.
I like that. It's simple but powerful. And how does emotional journaling tie into this self-awareness piece?
Emotional journaling is about having this dedicated space to explore those feelings and thoughts and patterns, especially around those moments when you find yourself seeking validation. It's a way to process your experiences, figure out what's driving you, and you can even track your progress as you start to shift those patterns.
So it's more than just a diary where you list what happened during the day. It's about our inner world.
Right. Right. It's about really understanding how situations make you feel, what thoughts are popping up. And sometimes just the act of putting those feelings into words, it brings a ton of clarity. Plus, when you look back at your entries, you might start to see these recurring themes, these triggers, things you weren't consciously aware of before.
So for you, the listener, how do you actually go about this? How do you do emotional journaling in a way that's really helpful?
Try using structured prompts. When you notice yourself wanting that external validation, reflect on a few key areas. First, describe the situation, what happened, who was involved, where you were. Then, write down your thoughts. Be as specific as possible, even if they seem silly or irrational. Next, pinpoint the emotions you felt, anxiety, shame, whatever it was. Maybe even rate their intensity on a scale of 1 to 10. Don't forget to notice any physical sensations too, racing heart, tight chest, anything like that. And lastly, think about your behavior and try to figure out the underlying need you were trying to meet. Were you looking for acceptance, competence, security, connection? Understanding that need is really key.
So it's about going deeper, not just recounting events, but really analyzing those inner experiences.
Exactly. And make sure to review your entries regularly, like maybe once a week. You'll start to see those patterns emerge, those triggers, and it can be incredibly valuable for changing those ingrained habits. So give it a try. See what you discover about yourself.
Okay, so we're starting with building that self-awareness through self-observation and emotional journaling. That's like step one. What comes next in this process of, like, cultivating our inner self-esteem garden?
Once you have that awareness, it's about intentionally working on what we could call internal reprogramming, cultivating a kinder inner voice, and challenging those old patterns. And the sources highlight two key tools for this: affirmations and self-compassion.
Okay, affirmations. People have strong feelings about those. Some find them super helpful, others are skeptical. So for those who are on the fence, what's the deal? Why might simply repeating positive statements actually make a difference?
It's a good question, and there's some science behind it. One key concept is neuroplasticity. Your brain's like a muscle that can be strengthened and changed. And repeating positive statements over time, it creates new neural pathways. So those positive thoughts, they become more automatic, more accessible. It's like carving a new path, right? The more you walk it, the easier it becomes. Affirmations also shift your focus. So instead of that constant stream of negative self-talk, you're directing your attention to what you want to cultivate. And it creates something called cognitive dissonance, but in a good way. Basically, when your positive words don't quite match your negative beliefs, your brain tries to resolve that conflict, and it can lead to those beliefs shifting over time.
Interesting. So it's not just magical thinking. There's a real process happening in the brain. But the sources point out that there are some pitfalls to watch out for when using affirmations, right?
Definitely. Like one big one is what we call the unbelievability factor. Saying things like, I am completely confident in everything I do. When you're far from feeling that way, it can backfire. Affirmations need to feel at least somewhat true for you.
Makes sense. What else should we watch out for?
Another one is toxic positivity. Using affirmations to deny or suppress difficult emotions. It's important to acknowledge those feelings first, maybe with self-compassion, and then use affirmations to build resilience. And then just mindlessly repeating words without any feeling or intention behind them, it's not likely to have much impact. The real power is in connecting with the emotion, the desired state, as you say, the affirmation.
So it's about the feeling behind the words.
Got it.
Got it. What are some guidelines for crafting affirmations that are actually effective?
Keep them positive, focusing on what you want to cultivate. Frame them in the present tense like they're already true for you. Make them personal using I statements. And like we said, keep them believable. You can also focus on your effort, on your values, or just on being a certain way, instead of focusing solely on external outcomes.
Okay, and how do we actually use these affirmations? How often?
Choose a few that resonate with you, like maybe 3 to 5, to start and repeat them regularly throughout the day. You can do it when you wake up, before bed, during breaks, or even when you notice those triggers for seeking validation popping up. Writing them down and putting them in visible spots helps too. And when you repeat them, try to really feel them. Visualize yourself embodying that quality. Be patient. Consistent effort is key.
What are some examples of affirmations that might be helpful for our listeners, specifically for reducing that reliance on external validation?
Here are a few. My worth comes from within, not from the opinions of others. I approve of myself and I trust my own judgment. I am enough exactly as I am right now. And if you're dealing with criticism, try. I can handle criticism with grace and learn from feedback without letting it define me.
Love those. Very direct and powerful. Now, you mentioned self-compassion earlier, alongside affirmations. How does being kind to ourselves play into building self-esteem?
Self-compassion is treating yourself with the same kindness and care that you would offer to a good friend who's struggling. It's like having your own back, no matter what. There are 3 key components here. First, self-kindness versus self-judgment. So being gentle with yourself instead of being harshly critical. Second, recognizing our common humanity. Remembering that everyone makes mistakes, everyone faces challenges. And third, mindfulness. Observing your thoughts and feelings with awareness and acceptance without getting swept away by them.
So being gentle, remembering we're not alone in our struggles, and learning to observe our emotions without judgment. Why is self-compassion so crucial for building lasting self-esteem?
Because it's the antidote to that inner critic we all have. It helps you build resilience. So you can cope with setbacks without falling apart. It fosters a sense of inner safety and security, so you don't have to constantly seek it externally. And unlike self-criticism, which often leads to fear and avoidance, self-compassion actually motivates growth from a place of kindness. You want to learn and grow because you care about yourself, not because you feel like you're worthless if you don't.
Right. It's about being on your own team.
Mm.
But the sources also make a point of distinguishing self-compassion from some other things that might sound similar, like self-pity or self-indulgence.
Yes, this is really important. Self-pity is about dwelling in your suffering and feeling sorry for yourself. Self-compassion recognizes that suffering is a shared human experience. It's also not self-indulgence. That's about giving into every desire in the moment, without thinking about the long term. And it's definitely not making excuses. Self-compassion is about acknowledging your mistakes, but with kindness and a desire to learn from them.
So how can we actually practice self-compassion, especially when those feelings of self-doubt or the urge for validation come up?
The sources offer some great exercises. One is the self-compassion break. It's a simple 3-step process. First, acknowledge that you're experiencing something difficult. Second, remind yourself that everyone goes through tough times. And third, offer yourself kindness. Maybe put your hand on your heart and say some kind words to yourself, like you would to a friend.
It's like being your own best friend.
Exactly. There's also compassionate letter writing. That's where you write a letter to yourself about a flaw or mistake, but you write it from the perspective of a loving, understanding friend. Soothing touch can help too. Putting a hand on your heart, giving yourself a hug. And finally, pay attention to your self-talk. Would you talk to a friend the way you're talking to yourself? If not, try rephrasing those critical thoughts in a kinder, more supportive way.
Okay, so we're learning to be kinder to ourselves, planting those positive seeds with affirmations. What's the next step in building this inner strength, this freedom from needing constant external validation?
It's twofold. Anchoring yourself in the present moment through mindfulness and meditation, and actively rewiring those unhelpful thought patterns. That's where cognitive restructuring comes in.
Okay, we've touched on mindfulness and meditation a bit, but how do they specifically help with this whole validation thing?
Well, they help you become less attached to those external pressures. By training your attention on the present moment, you're not dwelling on past judgments or worrying about future opinions, and you're not comparing yourself to others. Mindfulness helps you create that space where you can observe your thoughts and feelings without getting carried away by them.
So creating a gap between that trigger, like say a post that didn't get a lot of attention, and our automatic reaction of feeling bad about ourselves.
Exactly. Mindfulness helps you notice that gap, and you start to recognize those thoughts. They didn't like it, so I must be boring, as just thoughts, not facts. And by focusing on something neutral, like your breath or your body, you ground yourself in the present, which is usually much safer and calmer than all those negative scenarios our minds come up with. Plus, it helps you build tolerance for those uncomfortable feelings like insecurity or fear of disapproval, so you don't need to immediately seek that external validation to make them go away.
Okay, so that inner stability piece we talked about. How can we, the listeners, start incorporating mindfulness and meditation into our lives? What are some practical ways to do that?
There are a lot of great techniques you can start with. Breath awareness meditation, where you just focus on your breath, is a fantastic starting point. Body scan meditation, where you systematically bring your attention to different parts of your body, is another great one. Loving kindness meditation, where you extend wishes of happiness and well-being to yourself and others, is also powerful for cultivating those feelings of connection and compassion. Observing thoughts meditation, that helps you detach from those negative judgments and see them as passing mental events. And don't forget about informal mindfulness, just bringing your full attention to everyday tasks, like washing dishes or taking a walk. Even taking a few conscious breaths throughout the day can make a difference.
What are your tips for getting started with all this?
Start small. Even 5 or 10 minutes a day is great, especially when you're just starting out. Try to practice around the same time each day to build it into your routine. Be patient and kind to yourself. Your mind will wander, that's normal. The key is to gently bring it back to your chosen focus. There's no right or wrong way to feel. You can also use guided meditations from apps or online resources. They can be really helpful, especially in the beginning.
It sounds like building that mindfulness muscle is a really important part of feeling less dependent on external validation. Now let's talk about cognitive restructuring. How does that help us change those unhelpful thought patterns that might be driving this need for validation?
Cognitive restructuring is about becoming aware of your automatic thoughts, those negative or unhelpful thoughts that just pop into your head, recognizing the patterns of distorted thinking they often follow, and then learning to challenge them and develop more balanced alternatives.
So we're talking about actually examining those negative voices in our heads and questioning whether they're even true.
Yes, because your thoughts, they have a huge impact on your feelings and behaviors. If you're constantly thinking, I'm not good enough, you're probably going to feel anxious, insecure, and maybe act in ways that seek reassurance from others. Cognitive restructuring helps you change the way you think, which then shifts your feelings and actions.
You mentioned distorted thinking patterns. Can you explain what those are?
Sure. Cognitive distortions are like these thinking errors, these common patterns that lead to overly negative or inaccurate interpretations of situations. There are a bunch of them, but some that are relevant here are all or nothing thinking, seeing things in black and white, mind reading, assuming you know what others are thinking, fortune telling, predicting negative outcomes as if they're guaranteed, catastrophizing, blowing things out of proportion, emotional reasoning, believing your feelings are facts, and labeling, putting negative labels on yourself. Does any of that sound familiar?
Oh, absolutely. I've definitely been guilty of a few of those.
Most of us have. The key is just to be aware of them. And once you are, you can start to use this great tool called the thought record technique to actually challenge and change those thoughts.
Okay, tell us about that. How does the thought record technique work?
It's a structured way to examine those negative thoughts, often through journaling. First, describe the situation that triggered the negative feeling. Then, write down the exact thoughts that went through your mind. Next, identify the emotion you felt and rate its intensity. Then, try to pinpoint which cognitive distortion is at play. Is it all or nothing thinking, mind reading, whatever it might be?
Interesting. So really breaking it down.
Right. And then comes the challenging part. You actively question those thoughts. You look for evidence that supports them and evidence that contradicts them. You consider alternative explanations. You might even ask, what would I tell a friend who was having this thought? And based on all that, you try to develop more balanced, realistic thoughts.
So it's like a detective process, gathering evidence, examining the facts, and coming up with a more accurate interpretation.
Exactly. And by doing this consistently, you can weaken those old negative thought patterns and build a more positive view of yourself. It gives you that sense of control over your mindset, which is so important for self-esteem.
We've covered so much ground. But for you, the listener, how do you actually bring all this together into a plan, something concrete you can actually do?
Well, the sources suggest a 90-day roadmap to help you systematically cultivate what they call emotional autonomy, which is essentially that freedom from needing constant external approval.
Okay, a 90-day plan. I like it. Structured and actionable. What's the philosophy behind this roadmap?
It's all about progress, not perfection. Being kind and patient with yourself, being flexible, and really integrating these new skills into your life. It's broken down into 3 months, each with a specific theme.
What does that first month look like?
Month 1 is all about foundational awareness and kindness. You're deepening your understanding of your patterns and triggers, and really starting to make self-compassion a daily practice. That first week is about becoming aware and making that commitment to change. Week 2 is about identifying your specific triggers and understanding those emotional drivers we talked about. Week 3 is focused on cultivating self-compassion and getting clear on your values. And week 4 is about recognizing negative self-talk and those cognitive distortions.
Okay, so a lot of inner work, laying that foundation. What about month 2?
Month 2 is about actively building those skills. Week 5 is all about challenging negative thoughts using that thought record technique. Week 6 is about deepening your mindfulness practice. Week 7 is focused on self-care. And week 8 is about starting to set healthy boundaries.
Sounds like we're moving from understanding to action. And month 3?
Month 3 is all about integration and authentic living, so you're applying those skills you've been building. Week 9 is about practicing internal validation, becoming your own source of approval. Week 10 is about embracing imperfection and cultivating a growth mindset. Week 11 is focused on authentic communication and strengthening those boundaries. And week 12 is about reflecting on your progress and making a plan for the future.
It's a pretty comprehensive plan. And the sources mention daily exercises too, right? What are those?
The daily exercises are meant to be short, maybe 5 to 20 minutes each day. They could include journaling, tracking your triggers, practicing mindfulness, and doing those self-care activities we talked about. It's about consistency, even in small ways, to make these new habits stick.
So beyond the 90 days, what are some healthy habits we can focus on to build that long-term resilience?
Consistent self-care is huge. Making sure you're meeting your needs. It's an act of self-respect. Setting healthy boundaries is also crucial. It protects your time and energy and self-worth. And finally, building authentic relationships. Relationships based on mutual respect and acceptance, not on a need for validation.
Makes sense. And the sources provide some examples of how this all comes together for real people, right?
Yes, there's Alex, who was struggling with social media validation. They used self-awareness, self-compassion, and boundary setting to shift their focus inward. And then there's Ben, who is constantly seeking approval at work. He learned to challenge his negative thoughts, practice mindfulness, and set boundaries. Both of them found that genuine sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on external validation.
It's so encouraging to hear those real-life examples.
Yeah.
It shows us that this is possible.
It is possible. It takes effort and commitment, but it's so worth it.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. We've explored why we seek validation from others and how it can hold us back. And we've unpacked a ton of tools and strategies to help you cultivate true self-esteem from the inside out. Things like self-awareness, self-compassion, mindfulness, cognitive restructuring, and even this 90-day roadmap.
Remember, your worth is inherent. You don't have to earn it, achieve it, or seek it externally. It's already within you.
This is an ongoing journey, right? It's not a quick fix, it's a process. So be patient with yourself, be consistent, and most importantly, be kind to yourself along the way.
Absolutely. Celebrate every win and learn from the setbacks.
So as we end our deep dive, I want to leave you with one thought. What's one small step you can take today to shift your focus inward and nurture that self-worth? Maybe it's a minute of mindful breathing, a self-compassion break, or just noticing one of your triggers. Remember, even small actions done consistently can create big change. We hope this deep dive has given you the insights and tools to start building that unshakable sense of self-acceptance, that inner freedom that comes from knowing you are enough just as you are.
And if you have any questions or want to go deeper, remember there are tons of resources out there to support you on this journey. This is just the beginning.